Welcome to Playful Beginnings, a podcast about the magic of play therapy for therapists, students, and anyone interested. In our podcast, we'll explore the deeper understanding of play therapy and the skills we use when working with children.
We hope to help you understand the why behind what we do and how it helps kids heal and grow. I'm Dr. Christy Opiola, a working play therapist and university professor in North Carolina.
I'm Dr. Maggie Parker, a play therapist. Good morning, Christy.
Morning, Maggie.
I'm so excited to have one of a very prolific child-centered play therapy researcher and educator, Dr. PJ Blanco, who is a full professor at Tarleton State. He has published over 24 child-centered play therapy research projects. He has been department, not chair, but coordinator, clinical training coordinator, all sorts of different hats and roles. And his research has really looked at how child-centered play therapy works with academics and how it works in the school. And so we're so excited to have you here again today. Dr. Blanco, thank you for coming back.
Glad to be here and too kind. So thank you very much. Just glad to spend some time with you guys and sharing kind of some information.
Love it. Okay. That's what I was really curious about is how, because these kids are coming not because of they've experienced something or, I think sometimes when kids come in with trauma or, or divorce, you can expect, okay, maybe these things are going to come out in the playroom. But with at-risk academics, and then also not at-risk academics, it's kind of the whole gamut. And so I'm kind of curious, one, what did you notice in the playroom as they how were they playing or how did their play change? And then maybe how did the play differ between those that were identified as at risk and those that were typically functioning?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one funny thing that I recognized when I was doing the first grade study is how many kids wanted to build sand castles at the beginning of the year who couldn't. And by the end of the year, a large group of them could. I was like, wow, that's really cool that there's something going on where they're able to put these two pieces. And, looking back, is there something related to Piaget here where the brain is kind of now capable of putting this process in? Because they weren't getting taught how to do that unless maybe when they were outside in recess and they didn't go to the beach typically because it was the fall semester and then the spring semester. I'm assuming that they probably hadn't gone to the beach or anything, but a lot of kids had figured out, oh, if I add water to the sandbox or to the sand, put it in the bucket, it'll make a formed component or a formed little castle. So that was kind of one of the cool developmental pieces that I noticed with the kids in first grade. With the study, with anything, we have these kids academically at risk, but a lot of them were, functioning well, didn't have social emotional concerns that were identified by the teacher or by the school and seemed to be progressing well as far as other things except for maybe academics. And so the beauty of it is that we sometimes don't know, right, as therapists. A kid comes in who's normal functioning, doing well. If normal functioning in school is probably a better way of saying that as far as academics. And then week 3, their family is going through a divorce. And they experience a struggle, but they have the safe place to then explore what that's like for them. And so that's what I like about the idea of that normal functioning kids is that if they run into a concern or a struggle, then they have a safe place to process it. For a lot of our at-risk kids, yes, there was probably more typical things that you would see in the playroom when you're working at a clinic where parents are bringing in the child for a concern or whatnot. But with our normal academically functioning kids, we saw a lot of kind of that typical play, a lot of mastery play. It was interesting as to which kids would bring in play components related to academics. With our normal functioning kids, we didn't see a lot of play related to academics in the sense of they're actually sitting down doing work. I mean, I have kids who've gone to the sandbox and done math problems in the sandbox. Never instructed a kid to ever do that, but we had kids do this in the study. But they were always in the at-risk studies. The kids who were usually well functioning, they might bring in a little bit of, oh, my teacher said to do this, and that's just them exploring the world. But it was kind of interesting. I saw more academic play with at-risk kids because it seems they needed that safe environment to explore kind of how they were doing.
A piece of them didn't feel comfortable in that space.
Yeah.
And so when they could feel comfortable, they could try.
And that's why we tried the performance anxiety study and still,
Yeah.
didn't find that results. So that really led to kind of a last study, which was on secondary analysis. And so Dr. Hallum is the lead on that study. But what he did is he picked up those 6 studies and put them together so we could look at specific demographics. We don't have enough research out there to do a meta-analysis on this, but he kind of was able to put the studies we did together and do a secondary analysis. And it was kind of cool because we were able to kind of also see, oh, over the past so many years, we've seen this many kids. That's kind of neat to see because you do your studies, oh, this had 50 kids, this had 50 kids. But over time, oh, we almost saw around 200 kids in our studies. And we were able to kind of then look at specific demographics related to ethnicity and gender to kind of see if maybe there was a specific population that seemed to benefit more, or maybe a specific ethnicity. And so we did find some interesting things from that too. We found that overall, all kids benefited. That was the beauty of it, right? But when we parceled out specific results with gender and ethnicity, is that we found that female participants had a larger effect sizes overall than male participants. So oftentimes girls maybe don't get identified as needing services, and so here's a good indicator that girls that definitely can. We also found that Caucasian participants had the smallest effect sizes, while our non-Latinx students of color had the largest effect sizes. We also found overall that females of color had the largest effect sizes and gains over all groups/ethnicities, while Caucasian males had the smallest.
So fascinating looking
Yeah.
at that from an intersectionality lens and safety and oppression with all this. Yeah, that's fascinating. That's
Yeah.
just fascinating.
So
I'm
it really,
also,
oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
I'm curious since a lot of your work has been at risk, right? Do those numbers look similar, or do we see I'm gonna
Oh,
say
yeah.
that stereotypical, right? Was it a larger sample size of children of color over, do you know what I mean? Do you hear where
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
going here? That it's
Yeah.
sometimes what brings students in. And I know there's quite a bit of research out there about marginalization and identification into higher behavioral suspension rates, and then also higher
Yes.
rates sometimes into special education and some of those
Mhm.
components. So I'm just thinking at risk youth, right? Did your study have higher samples of children of color,
Yeah.
or was it more universal? Was it
Yeah,
more equally distributed?
sure, sure. I think I have the information here somewhere. I might have it written down. Let's see here. It looks our Caucasian group, and this is male and female put together, was at 48%.
Mm.
African American was 10%, Latinx was 35%, Asian American 4%, biracial 2%. So,
So against my stereotypical assumption, based on other data that I've read, that sometimes we
yeah.
see higher numbers.
Oh, for sure. Because, kids who have had significant struggles in the early part of their education, they get identified and flagged early on in life. And there's also cultural differences from just kids in the classroom. Some kids in their home life, it's culturally responsive to be allowed to get your needs met. And then they go to school and they're allowed to get their needs met and they're in the
Get in
office because
trouble.
they're a problem, but it's really that's their culture's way of responding, hey, I need help or I
Yeah.
need assistance.
Your sample about the sandcastles also reminded me of kind of Dweck's work, Carol Dweck's work,
Oh, yes.
about tenacity and motivation and how that plays
Having that
out.
growth
And
mindset.
yeah, and I just wonder if, which has kind of caught on wildfire in school districts, this idea of growth mindset. But
Hmm.
my guess is when you were doing your study, Dweck's work was not a prominent theme in schools. I
Sure.
don't remember hearing about it until maybe 2017, 2018,
Yeah.
more
I
about it. And so go
Oh,
ahead, I'm
God.
sorry.
Oh, I love there's a video clip that I show my intro to play therapy class of Carl Dweck and the meaning or the impact of praise. And it's a cool little video where she's just with her researchers kind of goes to the child and says, you worked really hard on these problems. And the other one is, you're really smart. And then seeing the kids take the next test and seeing the one who's really smart crumble because of the pressure versus the one who was given the encouragement is really trying hard to do better, even if they scored the same score initially.
Yeah.
And so,
Which made
yeah,
me
for
think
sure.
the play therapy space that really moves more towards that encouraging
Hmm.
side of what Dweck praise, right? We in CCPT, we try to really shy away from the word praise and call it,
Hmm.
motivation or encouragement or kind of different language. But that, they get a lot of that in the playroom. So when you were giving the sandcastle kind of example, my head was thinking, well, they kept getting messages that they could continue to explore this, right? It
Yeah.
wasn't intentional, you weren't guiding them, but that as it got hard, kind of that grit and tenacity that it requires to keep trying showed up in the play space instead of being, this sand is stupid and there's something wrong with it, so I can't make sandcastles or whatever might come up sometimes.
Yeah. It would be interesting to see if the non-study kids, if they would how they would experience the sand, if maybe they
Yeah,
had a different experience or without that encouragement over time, or if they were building sandcastles at that age. I don't know.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's really
The other,
fascinating. Sorry, go ahead, Chrissy.
no, please go, Maggie.
No, that was all. I just was giving my.
Yeah. The other thing I was thinking about is how often masking comes up in school settings, even at an early age, right? Even maybe your kid's not at risk. We're doing a really good job of masking. And then as CCPT went on and they were fully accepted and they could kind of take their mask off to really show what was going on. Or if a big life event happened, right? I know in some of my early times, and I think I've shared this on the podcast, when I started at schools here, and we talked to the schools and then went in to get the referral list, it was all kids who were more on the externalizing side, right? Say their behaviors
Mm.
were big and they felt overwhelming to the teachers, but the kids who were more internalizers, the ones who faded in the background, who weren't screaming to get attention, were never on the list, right? And
Hmm.
sometimes when I think of at-risk youth, kind of that, the internalizers sometimes are the ones that don't show up on that list, but need equally as much support
Absolutely. And,
in the school setting.
it goes back to, and I don't mean to stereotype, but, the quiet girl who's internally crumbling never gets the services she needs. And so my hope is the secondary analysis at least is some support in recognizing that those kids might need it the most and can benefit the most,
Yeah.
It was
for
definitely
sure.
helpful
Yeah.
for me as a caregiver because I went in there and I was, nope, just because they are quiet and not doing this. But yeah, so I think it's really interesting to hear you talk about this because your research, one, has helped me as a caregiver, but also has really, Christy and I looked at it pretty in depth for our this meta-analysis that we just finished. And then I used your research really as a support for a student who adapted in Uganda and Tanzania, where cultural values really are placed on numeracy and literacy. And so being able to show that what CCBT and what we value and what we believe also has these benefits, I think really supports kind of helps us and CSBT get into new places and get into other spaces that perhaps it wasn't before. And so I'm really grateful for your research.
No,
It's been really helpful for me. And it's really helped provide kind of a solidified something where in our culture, that's valued. And maybe emotional awareness and acceptance is not valued as much. So maybe the reason why we're doing it isn't necessarily for academics, but that we can say that it supports it really allows for a lot more freedom. So I really appreciate it.
well, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much because, you do this work for years and your hope is to make a impact in the future. Because I don't think anybody's really, I'm going to do research because I think it's a good way to spend time because it's a lot of work that sometimes you feel it's unrecognized. I appreciate that.
Well, and I also think intervention research, it's so risky, right? Because we hope it's going to turn out the way we want, but there's many times research flops and
Yes.
what I don't know if the general